It's a funny thing. Every growing organization, every movement, even families, they all eventually hit the same wall. Success itself starts creating problems. Well, today, we're going to dig into a 2,000-year-old story that, believe it or not, gives us a brilliant blueprint for solving one of the most common challenges of growth. So what is that core challenge?
Yeah, this is the big one, right? How do you stay united when you get bigger? Maybe you've seen this happen. You're in a startup that just hired its 50th employee, or a local community group that's suddenly booming. You know this tension. How do you scale without splintering apart? How do you hold on to who you are when all these new faces, new cultures, new ideas are pouring in? Well, this ancient community, they face this exact crisis.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the very real problem they were up against. Then we'll look at their honestly genius solution. And from there, we'll dig deeper into the core principles that made it all work, right down to the bedrock of what held them together.
All right, first up, a crisis of growth. Let's paint a picture. We're talking about the very first days of the Christian community in Jerusalem, and on the surface, things are going incredibly well. Maybe a little too well.
I mean, their numbers were just exploding. This wasn't a sign they were failing. Heck no, it was a sign of incredible success. But as anyone who's ever managed growth will tell you, more people always means more complexity. And in their case, it started to mean more division.
And the conflict here is fascinating because of how specific it was. This wasn't just some vague disagreement. It was a real cultural and linguistic divide. So you had the local, Hebrew-speaking believers on one side, and on the other, believers from all over the Roman Empire, the diaspora, who spoke Greek. And the complaint was super specific. In the daily distribution of food, the widows from the Greek-speaking group were being overlooked. It was a classic in-group versus out-group problem, and it was born directly from their rapid growth.
Now, this is the kind of internal bickering that can absolutely kill a movement, right? But the way the apostles responded, wow, it's a total masterclass in leadership. They didn't just put a Band-Aid on the problem. They actually used it as a chance to build a stronger, more resilient structure for the future.
So their strategy had 3 key steps. First, and this is so important, they didn't just make a decision behind closed doors. Nope, they brought everyone together. Total transparency. Second, they reminded everybody of the why. What's our main mission here? They refocused on what mattered most to them, prayer and teaching. And then third, based on that mission, they innovated. They literally created a whole new role to handle the very real practical needs of the community. And this quote just nails the principle they were working with. Being faithful didn't mean being frozen in the past, doing things exactly the way they'd always been done. Not at all. True faithfulness meant keeping your eyes on the goal. In this case, unity and caring for all the members, even if it meant you had to change the structure. They adapted. They evolved.
And check out the result of this process, because this is crucial. The community picks 7 men. And here's the kicker. All 7 of them have Greek names. The very group that felt left out was now put in charge of the solution. You see, this wasn't just about logistics. It was a powerful act of reconciliation that went right to the heart of the division and healed it.
But, a clever org chart isn't what really holds a community together in the long run. The source texts show us that underneath this practical solution was something much deeper, a radical new understanding of who they were, a shared identity built on this incredible metaphor. The Apostle Peter brings up this powerful image of a building. He says that Jesus is the living stone, the cornerstone. Now, in ancient architecture, the cornerstone was everything. It was the first stone laid, the one that set the alignment for the entire building. The whole structure depended on it.
Okay, so if Jesus is the cornerstone, here's the next piece of the puzzle. The members of the community, they're also living stones. Think about that. They aren't just passive members sitting in the pews, so to speak. They are the active, living parts of this new spiritual building. Every single person has a role to play in the structure.
And this was a completely revolutionary idea at the time. For centuries, the big sign of God's presence on earth was the massive stone temple in Jerusalem. But now, these writers are saying, hold on. The new temple isn't a place, it's a people. The community itself, when it's unified and loving, that's the place where God dwells. This shared identity is what truly holds them together, way more than any organizational structure ever could.
Okay, so if the community is a house made of these living stones, what's the mortar? What's the glue holding them all together? What's the actual foundation of their trust in each other and in this whole mission?
Well, the texts use a phrase that can sound kind of weird to us today, the fear of God. But we have to get this right. This isn't about being terrified. The biblical meaning is almost the exact opposite. It really means trusting so completely in God's love that it becomes the bedrock of your hope.
This verse from the Psalms just captures it beautifully. The fear is tied directly to hope and unfailing love. It's that confidence you get from knowing you are seen, that you're cared for. This is the spiritual mortar that binds all those living stones together.
And this is so important. This hope wasn't just some abstract, pie-in-the-sky idea. For them, it was based on real, lived experience, on their collective memory. They look back at their own history at stories like the Exodus, being saved from famine and slavery, and they could say, look, we've been through impossible stuff before, and we were taken care of. We can trust that we'll be taken care of now.
So, we've got a problem, a practical solution, a deep identity, and a foundation of hope. That brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, the ultimate guide for this whole construction project. What are the blueprints they're all following? In the Gospel of John, we get this incredibly honest, totally relatable question from the Apostle Thomas. Right in the middle of all this uncertainty, facing the loss of their leader, he basically just says it plain. We're lost. We don't have a map. We don't even know where we're going. So how could we possibly know how to get there?
And Jesus' answer is, well, it's one of the most profound statements in the entire text. He doesn't pull out a map. He doesn't give Thomas a 5-step plan. He makes a statement about who he is.
And this just reveals the ultimate truth of the whole thing. The guide is the way. See, the community's journey isn't about following a set of rules to get to some destination. It's about embodying the life and the teachings of their leader. The path isn't a what, it's a who. And that is the architect's plan for this spiritual house.
And then, if that wasn't enough, comes this just astonishing promise. This whole project isn't about building some perfect, inward-looking little community that shuts itself off from the world. No. Jesus tells them that they won't just continue his work, they'll do even greater works. He's basically handing them the keys.
And that right there connects everything back to the very beginning. The whole reason to solve their internal squabbles, the reason to innovate, the reason to build this new identity, it wasn't just for them. The whole point of building a strong, unified community was to empower them to go out and do a mission of love and liberation in the world.
So, this 2,000-year-old story leaves us with a pretty big challenge, doesn't it? It gives us this incredible model for navigating growth and conflict, for innovating while staying true to our core mission. But it also pushes us further, asking what it's all for. It kind of prompts us to look at our own communities, our own organizations, and ask ourselves what greater works of healing, of unity, and of service are we being called to build today?